To understand the trouble we face today in the West, we need to understand the primal force underlying all of society: sex. Now, I'm not some Freudian, sexually obsessed philosopher. I'm just trying to be real about human nature and civilization. Our advanced society is built upon a series of markets. There's the economic market where goods and services are exchanged. There's the market of politics and power. There's the intelligence market. But deeper than all of these is the sexual market. Today we think of the economy as king, but we have to understand most men make money to get women. Most men seek power not for praise, but for status, because status gets them access to the best mates. Now, there are exceptional people motivated by art or other things, but for the vast majority, the quest for sex and intimate relationships rules their younger years and molds the rest of their lives. This is why ancient founders of religions and civilizations paid first attention to sex and marriage laws, as we will get into. Essentially, these hold society together, and most importantly, they determine what men become and who gets to breed. Without marriage laws, sexual chaos inevitably leads to collapse or revolution. Now, a lot of these statements may come off as abrasive to modern ears, and many people may disagree with me. But those who disagree probably have naive notions about love, or are just married and haven't experienced the complete chaos and frustration of dating today, and how much that impacts the rest of life. After the sexual revolution in the 1960s, and the advent of dating apps and the promotion of widespread promiscuity in the West, we faced the worst dating crisis perhaps ever seen in the history of humanity. Costin Alamaru pointed this out well in his book, Selective Breeding and the Birth of Philosophy. Quote, "Look at the pages of any popular magazine, and you see the youth, both men and women, and not just the youth, cast adrift in confusion and pain. Freedom from socially and legally enforced monogamy, one boy for every girl and vice versa, has not led to equality and happiness, but laid bare the unadorned and brutal hierarchy of nature. The most desirable males and females, who are a minority, have lives full of sexual and romantic opportunities, adventures, the choices of excess, and numerous options should they decide to marry and have a family life. For the rest, both men and women, the vast majority, there is a lack of fulfillment, even desolation in youth, and later on, unsuitable options and unhappy, very late marriages marred by resentments and dashed hopes. Often there are no marriages nor any long-term pairings after a certain age." Unquote. We thought that the sexual revolution would liberate us, but it has only exacerbated inequality and left most people more lonely than ever. You see, monogamy is not natural, as we'll get into in part 2 of this video. It is in fact the safeguard of society. Monogamy and marriage enforces that men and women settle down in one-to-one long-term relationships before sex. This creates a much more balanced distribution of dating across society. When monogamous marriage as the ideal goes away, hypergamy and short-term dating strategies emerge, meaning the majority of women will go for the top 10 or 20% of men. And why not? These men are available because they're no longer in long-term monogamous relationships, so they give attention to a wider range of women. Top men will often have one partner after the next, or be splitting time between 5+ women, while the rest of men can't get a date. The problem is in the West right now, is we live in a hypersexualized and unfamiliar world. This is the worst combo possible. Dating apps and bars, the places where most people meet each other now, are totally unfamiliar, meaning women get tons of attention from men who probably aren't the right match for them. And all men get no attention and just experience this fierce competition where most of them are left behind. It's like the first day of college every single day of the year. And this is a terrible situation to be in, where both sexes are getting preoccupied with superficial indicators of value. To quote Costin Alamaru again, "No question is more painful for young people today. No subject seems to inflict more emotional scars and batter more egos than one's worth in the sexual market." Ultimately, promiscuity only benefits a very small number of the population, mainly young, attractive women and high-status men. Everyone else loses. And wise men know this is how nations fall and revolutions start. Part 2, the brutal inequality of nature. I posted a video recently about why the dating market is broken, and it got hundreds of thousands of views and thousands of replies from people in despair. Good-looking 25-year-old men who had never had sex, women who can't find a good man and keep getting hurt by bad ones, men who have gone decades without getting a single date, women who lost their beauty and chances of ever finding a husband. It's a bloodbath out there. And this is nothing new. This is just a reversion to a more archaic form of human life. We have to understand, monogamy was a traditional safeguard against the most vicious part of human nature, and that is polygyny, where the top men get all the females, which leaves most women unsatisfied and most men lonely. For instance, I knew many polyamorous couples or people in open relationships in the past town I lived. They were trying to break out of oppressive monogamy as something ancient and outdated. One day, I heard my two female roommates talking about how their men aren't getting laid, and that their men are angry and hurt because these two women have been sleeping around more. In hearing their conversation, I realized two things that these women don't understand. One, for a man to get laid many times, he has to be a top 1% man. And for a female to get laid many times, all she has to do is ask. And the second thing I realized was that these two women were sleeping with the same guys. And I laughed because I know those men, and they have slept with half the town. Every other attractive girl who is, quote, polyamorous sleeps with them. And I hate to break it to y'all, but that is not polyamory or polygamy. That is polygyny, where one man sleeps with the majority of females, while most men get nothing. The same thing happens on dating apps and social media to a much worse degree. For instance, on dating apps, women only swipe right on about 5% of men. These men tend to get all the females, and the females, who are encouraged to be promiscuous and focus on their career over a family, don't mind sleeping with a hot, high-status guy. This is a soft form of polygyny. Yeah, the top men don't have hundreds of wives, but they have close to infinite access to women, a digital harem, and this is a flashback to archaic times. You see, top men have always collected women. Solomon in the Bible was said to have thousands of wives. Most empires of the past, like in Persia for instance, the kings had harems of thousands of the hottest women collected from all over the empire. Noble rulers across most races and traditions collected hundreds of women. The Greek aristocrats had wives, concubines, flute girls, and highly paid hetaira or escorts. And other figures like Genghis Khan are said to have hundreds of sons with hundreds of women. And this is very revealing about evolutionary biology. You see, biologically, men can have as many offspring as possible, while women only a few. So men tend to want to plant their seeds everywhere, while women have to be very selective for what seed they get. This is why men compete for status, because only high-status males reproduce, and the strongest genetics are then passed down. This is called polygyny and hypergamy, where women try to date up and across social structures. They tend to go for high-status men, but high-status men are a minority. So when monogamy goes away, most women end up sharing. Walruses are famous for this. They tend to have one male to 23 females. The same thing with a pack of lions. One male wins all the females by killing the other males and their offsprings. He wants all the women to pass down only his genes. This is fine for the animal kingdom and biological evolution, but terrible for society. And society has always managed this instinct towards hypergamy, because when sexless men don't receive love, they will burn down the village to feel its warmth. In the majority of primitive tribes, for instance, the chief or best hunter would maybe have a couple of wives max, but there are strict customs against excess, because too much inequality would create conflict in the tribe, and the rebellious young men would overthrow any leader who got too many women. This was the naturally enforced egalitarianism of the primitive tribe, but this traditional model doesn't work in large civilizations. As we saw with the ancient Jewish people and Persians, top men got as many women as possible. But then Christianity came along and introduced an entire new paradigm, that of strict monogamous marriage. This was a terrible deal for the top 1% of men, but a great deal for the rest of society. Women didn't have to share husbands anymore, and most men got a mate. And this changed everything for European people and the West in general. Although there was still promiscuity, it was heavily discouraged. In ancient Rome, for instance, censors would go around punishing young men for not being married because they knew that promiscuity in unmarried youth would lead to social unrest and broken marriages. Monogamy was a great solution to the issues of polygyny and hypergamy because the best men and women would get married to each other early on, removing themselves from the dating pool and ensuring there's a better chance of other people getting a one-to-one match down the ladder. Although monogamy has its shadow for sure, it is the best solution we've found thus far. With good courting rituals and a social community that gets to know each other, it probably produces the best results in general. And I'd argue that some shitty marriages are better than a society ruled by promiscuity, where 60% of women sleep with the top 20% of men, and the rest of everyone else is lonely, despairing, and angry. That is the reality of today that very few are talking about. Part 3. Ancient marriage laws. Men compete for status constantly. Throw a couple of women into any room of single men, and the jockeying for a mate will instantly occur. But status is often arbitrary, and it can be molded as wise founders understood. For instance, the best hunter and warrior used to be the highest status in Germanic tribes, while in certain African tribes, the man who could grow the biggest yam was considered high status. High status is essentially that which is most respected and desired in a society, but this icon can change over time. When this happens, you change what people, and especially men, seek to become. Quote, "Who wins in the sexual market as it is formed in a particular society, who gets to breed, is closely related, nearly identical to the question of how the next generation in that society is to be constituted. The question of sexual and breeding laws is therefore identical to the question of regime, constitution, or foundation as such." Costin Alamario. The first laws amongst ancient people like in India and Greece and Rome had to do with marriage and breeding, how mates are chosen. The wise founders of cities understood that by directing marriage laws, you direct the course of civilization. For instance, of the 10 Commandments of Moses, 3 had to do with family, marriage, and sex. Also, the most important legislation passed during the regime changes in Rome had to do with marriage. In ancient India, the law of Manu and the caste system were set up thousands of years ago to regulate marriage, religion, and breeding. Again, in Athens, we see that Solon, the legendary founder, reformed marriage laws to make sure marriages happened on the basis of citizen quality and not wealth or personal gain. So many ancient myths couple together marriage laws and sacred union with a successful nation and associate promiscuity with demise. The story of Lilith, for instance, as it appears in the Colburn Bible, is a perfect example of this. Lilith was blamed with toppling a whole nation because she subverted the sex icons and encouraged promiscuity with hot men instead of great men, which destroyed the next generation of boys. She went behind the wise elders' back and copulated out of lust with men in the forest, and encouraged other men and women to come join her. This created confusion within the nation, frustration in many, and debased the customs that ensured men aspired to be great and manly. You see, if women desire noble and masculine men, and reserve sex for those men of status, the common man will seek to rise to that position in order to earn a mate. If women desire looks and wealth and superficial promiscuity, men will stoop to fulfill that request. And this changes the type of man and offspring produced. From these examples, we can see why modesty and selective breeding was so important in far ancient times. Whatever women admired and sought, men became. Hence, modesty and chastity were always the women's virtues because it ensured the flourishing of true men and harmonious society. The women's gaze directs the course of human evolution. And to leave you with a final quote, "For it is of the greatest importance which qualities a wife also selects for in husband, what types of men are rewarded and given a chance to have a posterity." This knowledge is not lost on the hidden leaders of today. Change what is high status, aka being woke and virtue signaling, and you change what young women seek in men, and therefore change what men become. And this is a very easy lever to pull if you control the media and wish to mold humanity in a certain direction. Control the status icons like Hollywood does, and you control everything. But have hope, my friends, because not all is doom and gloom. Many men are waking up and rejecting the modern dating market, and women's biological instinct and attraction towards masculine men cannot be wholly thwarted by media. So although it may get darker, there is hope on the horizon for a new paradigm, and it is up to us to create that. Hey, Wisdom Warriors. Thanks for watching. If you want to go deeper and get my exclusive content on philosophy and personal development, I highly encourage you to join my new school community. It's free right now. Link in the description below. Also, you can talk to me one-on-one. Anyways, if you don't want to do those kinds of things, here's a video related to this one about why dating is broken in 2024. I'll see you over there. Peace.